wasn't exactly cutting around the issue or being delicate, was it? He just comes right out, matter of fact, and says it. But why doesn't she respond with anger to that? What she says is she backs up and she says, "Whoa, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet." Right? That's her response. And then her response even further is she runs into town and she gets her, she gathers up these guys that she's apparently been with and tells the men of the town. They all come out to hear because she tells them, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did." So why was she not offended by him? A lot of people in today's world, as far as encountering our culture, they want us as believers to say, "Well, I know that my lifestyle is my lifestyle and your lifestyle is okay for you. Who are we to judge love, etc., etc." But there's a simple phrase, love the sinner, hate the sin. People are like, "Oh, well, that's so trite." But with Jesus in his life, it wasn't trite at all. It was real. She sensed in his spirit a lack of distaste for her. He was willing to, drink from her cup. You don't get any more personal than that. She could have had some kind of disease or whatever, and he, if you study Jewish culture, some people say that could have rendered him ceremonially unclean by sharing a drink with her. But he saw the person. He saw her as just a human being who had no love in her life and needed God's love. But he wasn't shy about telling her where she stood and who he was. She said, "Well, we know the Messiah someday will come." And she tries to get off topic and get into a religious argument with him. And he says to her, "I am he, the one who stands for you. I am the Messiah." So she responds to him. She sees his authenticity. She sees also his purity. But it's not off-putting for her. Why? Because there was genuine love in his heart for her. And she knew it. She sensed it. People know. People know if you care. In Rebecca Pippert's book, she talks about a situation where she went out witnessing, sharing evangelism with on a Saturday or something. And when they were done, the guy was disappointed with her because he said, "You only got to the 4 points. There's 2 more points, and you got it out of order." And she said, "Well, let me ask you." She said, "What were the names of the 4 people we just spoke to?" And he said, "I don't know." And she makes the point that here he was so wrapped up in delivering the message that he had completely disconnected with them as people. And any person realizes that. But Jesus had authenticity and purity. It requires sacrifice and humility. If you come at people with "Hey, let me tell you how it is," and I always tell people, if you're going to share with Jewish people, some of the Gentiles want to sort of tell them, and it's like, well, they've got thousands of years of history, before you ever came along with your message. Jewish people don't like that type of approach from anybody. Who does, really? Ask questions is the best way to approach people. And to probe and to share with humility. How much time do I have?
15.
Do I? Really?
10 minutes.
Wow, don't tell me 15, I'll take 20.
Yeah, I realize that. We do one
You
more.
corrected yourself. That was a smart move.
Yeah, we do one more song at the end.
Okay.
So,
all right. I want to give you some examples of Jesus and his radical identification. Well, let's get to the next slide. Radical identification requires Jesus. If we're trying to come at people with some clever idea of our Christian worldview or something, or we're going to argue apologetics, that's good to have that background and to understand. and have a good background in theology to be able to answer questions. If you share your faith, you're going to get asked questions. And you know what? You'll start reading your Bible a lot more because you're going to get asked questions you don't know the answer to. And if you're coming at it with pride, what will happen is you'll just start getting in a fight and arguing with people. But humility would be, wow, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I'll go study and I'll come back and we can sit down and there's an opportunity for you to expand with that person in your interaction. But a lot of times we just get angry and we just turn people off because they ask a question we know the answer to.
How much time do you have? Eternity is a long time.
Yes, exactly. And make yourself available to people. So here we have some great examples. We're going to take Jesus with us. Let's see what Jesus did real quickly. First of all, the blind man. I don't have time to read the passage, but you can study these if you'd like. It says, he was approached by a man who was blind, and actually it was in the song today. Jason was a lyric in one of the songs. It said, having said this, Jesus was now going to perform a miracle and heal this man. He saw his faith, and he said, having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva. That's kind of weird. And put it on the man's eyes. Now, what do you notice about that? What's most interesting about that, besides the spitting? Which for guys is kind of cool. Girls are going, oh, that's disgusting. He spit.
Mix the dirt with the fjord.
Well, that's kind of you're getting a lot deeper than I'm about to get. But that might be a whole other message. But what's the most profound thing about this?
That it wasn't simply a contact heal, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. You know, many of the other healings that Jesus did, he laid his hand on the person, or somebody laid their hand on him. The woman with the bleeding, or the Roman soldier whose daughter was dying. There wasn't the need for sort of a secondary step.
Yes, was it magic spit? Well, I can see a Monty Python episode pulling out this. Ye holy spittle of our Lord, the sacred mud shall be applied. It wasn't. Jesus didn't do that because he needed the extra spit to kind of make it work. It wasn't a magic trick. As Chris pointed out, many of his healings involved touching. Well, in this case, can you imagine this blind beggar from this time period with blind man, his eyes? I bet you his eyes maybe they weak, maybe they're dirty. People probably looked away from him. Here we have Jesus goes out of his way to touch this man in the most personal way possible. To touch the eyes that had been ashamed to him his whole life. As people would look away, oh, disgusting, I can't even look at that. Jesus took and he put mud made from his own body, his own saliva, and he put that on that man's eyes. He touched that man. Because as I mentioned before, Jesus was engaged not just physically, but also emotionally and spiritually. He saw that this man emotionally had needs. Sure, once it was done, he's going to be able to see. But there was that emotional healing that Jesus gave him by, can you imagine the rest of his life saying, he put his hands on my eyes. Can you imagine that? That's a radical identification he makes. And we have Zacchaeus. Called Matthew, what's important about this story is that Jesus, after they criticized him for calling out a tax collector who was way worse than even the IRS because they would take money off the top. So they were not just collecting the Romans' taxes, they were also ripping everybody off.
The government doesn't do that.
Well, they do it legally. This was, even worse. IRS isn't very popular right now with April 15th looming for people. I know it isn't for me. But Jesus says, he says, well, why are you hanging out with these tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners. So, if we're going to reach the world, we need to hang out with some sinners. That's going to have to happen. We're never going to reach our world. Zacchaeus is an unusual story. Everybody knows the story about he was in a tree. What a weird story. Here's this guy, and Jesus is walking along. He sees this crazy guy up in a tree. So desperate to get a view of Jesus. He's short, so he gets up in this big tree to get a look at him. And what did Jesus say? Did he say, oh, stay away from that cuckoo bird there? Literally, he's up in a tree. What a wacko, Don't want to get involved with that. He says, Zacchaeus, I need to come to your house today. It's a radical identification he made. And then the story of Jesus anointed by the sinful woman. And the Pharisees are so uncomfortable with this that this impure woman is washing his feet. And they can just see them just like their skin crawling. Whoa, this is really weird. This woman who's not a nice girl, she's like washing his feet and doing this all. They said to him, if this man were a prophet, he would know who was touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. But what they didn't know is those were exactly the kinds of people that Jesus sought to touch. Just one thing I'll read from Rebecca Pippert's book, where she's talking about the idea of radical identification that I borrowed for the message today. Often we are blind. We act as if those around us were not really people like us. If we see them bleed, we pretend they aren't really hurting. If we see them alone, we tell ourselves they probably like it that way. But Jesus wants to heal our sight. He wants us to see that the neighbor next door or the people sitting next to us on a plane or in a classroom are not interruptions to our schedule. They are there by divine appointment. Jesus wants us to see their needs, their loneliness, their longings, and he wants us to have the courage to reach out to them. If we are to do that, we need to do two things. We will have to take risks as well as get beneath the surface of people's lives. To take initiative opens up the risk of rejection. To let people inside our lives is a frightening but essential ingredient in evangelism. It's risky to abandon our security blankets in order to penetrate the lives of others. And she goes on to say in a later part of her book, what we must not forget is that we incarnate Jesus. In a certain spiritual way we do that. As he dwells in us and as we share. Whatever our life intersects with, so does Jesus. Whomever we touch, Jesus touches. We do not simply give the gospel, we are the gospel. And the last point, which I'm not going to be able to get to, but I'll just show it to you, the screen, and leave that up. The final panel would be you. That's what's required. We're the salt of the earth. If the salt loses its savor, it's useless. If salt loses the saltiness, what good is it? So we need to have that purity, and we need to be radically different. But we need to, if we're stuck in the salt shaker, we're not going to make our meal taste very good, are we? And we're also the light of the world. It says, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father which is in heaven. It's not about sharing a tract or a message with people or taking them to a Christian event. It's about actual good works, mitzvahs, if you will, acts of kindness and love and sacrifice that tell the world that they can see, without a doubt, that they know we really do